Honestly, sometimes I swear the news cycle is trying to give me whiplash.
Yeah, tell me about it.
One minute it's rate cuts, the next it's Elon Musk in court, then Apple's in the hot seat. It's like, make it stop.
It's like drinking from a fire hose, right?
Exactly. So, to save all of us from drowning in the sea of headlines, what's on the agenda for today's deep dive?
We're going deep on an excerpt all about, well, pretty much everything it feels like. Global markets, tech giants, and legal clashes.
Ooh, okay, we're going global today. I like it. But
Yeah.
where do we even begin to unpack all of that?
So the idea is to connect the dots between these stories that seem totally separate at first glance, and then, this is key, figure out how they might actually impact you, the person listening right now.
All right, I'm listening. Hit me.
Particularly if you care about tech, if you're into investing, or even if you're just like, hey, how's this world changing around me? Fig, this one's for you.
Music to my ears. I'm all about that. So let's start with something near and dear to everyone's heart. Our wallets. The excerpt mentions something about the Fed potentially cutting interest rates. Good news for some, I'm sure, but what's the real deal for everyday people like me who don't speak economist?
Okay, so imagine this. When the Fed cuts rates, it's basically like they're making it cheaper to borrow money, right?
Okay, I'm with you so far.
So that loan you might want for, say, a new car or maybe even a house down the line, it can become more affordable.
Oh, okay, so potentially more people buying houses, cars, boosting the economy?
Potentially, yeah. And the excerpt actually highlighted that this could be especially good news for small businesses, the backbone of the economy, and for regional banks too.
So more jobs, more growth in local communities, that kind of thing.
Right, exactly. But, and this is a big but, the excerpt also brought up this idea of market volatility.
Oh boy, here comes the but.
Yeah. And essentially what that means is that things could get a little shaky, a little unpredictable in the stock market.
Because investors are freaking out.
Well, they're not exactly freaking out, but they are adjusting, reevaluating things based on these new interest rates. It's like a big reset button's been hit.
The wonderful world of the stock market, always full of surprises. And speaking of surprises, tech stocks have been particularly wild lately, haven't they? Nvidia comes to mind. But hold on, before we go down that rabbit hole, I remember the excerpt mentioned something about Japan, as in like an alternative investment opportunity.
Oh, absolutely. We should definitely circle back to that a bit later.
Let's bookmark that, Japan. We're coming back to you. But for now, we're hopping across the globe to Europe, where it sounds like Apple's got a target on its back.
Yeah, so this whole Apple situation is more than just a tech story. It's about power.
Oh, juicy. Tell me more.
The EU is bringing the hammer down with something called the Digital Markets Act, or DMA for short.
That's you.
And it's basically their way of trying to level the playing field in the digital world, make things fairer.
Fairer how?
Well, they want to force Apple to open up its systems a bit. Like, imagine being able to use Spotify with Siri or having more choices when it comes to how you pay for stuff on your iPhone.
Okay, I see where you're going with this. More choices for consumers, usually a good thing, right?
In theory, yes. More competition, that can lead to lower prices, more innovation, all that good stuff. But, and you knew there was going to be a but, there are some valid concerns too.
Of course, there's always a but. Lay it on me.
Some folks are worried that if you force Apple to change how its systems work at such a fundamental level, it could create security risks.
Oh, like make it easier for hackers to do their thing?
Potentially, yeah.
Yeah.
Or it might even mess with the user experience, Like, what if that third-party app you start using because it's now an option isn't as secure, or it just doesn't work as smoothly with your iPhone? That's not great either.
Yeah, that's a really good point. It's like you want more freedom, more choice, but not at the expense of security or a seamless experience. So it's this delicate dance, this balancing act between fostering competition and also ensuring that, things still work well for the end user.
Man, this stuff makes you really think about the kind of digital world we want to live in,
Yeah,
It's not as simple as it seems.
not at all. What do you want the future of the internet to look like? What are we prioritizing here? It's tough.
It really is. Okay, moving on. Let's talk Elon Musk and his little legal tango in Brazil.
Oh, yeah, this is a good one.
The excerpt mentioned something about X, or Twitter, as we dinosaurs still call it, getting temporarily banned there.
Right. And then they found, shall we say, a creative workaround.
Which, of course, landed them in even hotter water with the Brazilian courts, because why make things easy? Right? Sounds like somebody needs better lawyers or fewer creative ideas. I can't tell.
Right. So what's the real story here? What's at the heart of this legal battle?
At its core, It's this fundamental tension that we're seeing more and more between governments who have their laws and their ideas of what's acceptable and these massive tech companies.
It's like the unstoppable force versus the immovable object.
And content moderation is right there in the middle of it all. I mean, who gets to decide what flies online, what's okay, what's not okay? It gets even more complicated when you factor in the fact that every country has its own laws, its own cultural norms, sensitivities.
Right. And what happens if, let's say, Brazil wins this one, sets a precedent? Does every country then get to dictate the rules of the internet within their borders? I mean, the internet at its core was supposed to be this global, interconnected thing.
Exactly, and that's what's really at stake here.
Yeah.
The future of online communication.
Yeah.
Are we headed towards a more fragmented internet? One where what you see and what you can say depends on where you're sitting at that very moment.
Yeah.
It's a pretty big deal.
It's kind of blown my mind a little bit. Okay, before we wrap things up, can we please come back to Japan? I'm still stuck on that whole potential bright spot thing you mentioned earlier.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Remember how we were talking about market volatility, things being a little uncertain?
Vividly.
Well, Japan is interesting because they're kind of like this island of stability, economically speaking at least.
And their tech scene is supposed to be pretty cutting edge, right?
It's really fascinating what they've got going on over there.
Mhm.
The excerpts specifically called out their robotics and automation industries as ones to keep an eye on, big time.
Yeah. Robots. It's like they're living in the future over there.
Right, and here's the other thing. Their currency exchange rate is looking really favorable right now, which means investing in Japan could potentially be very, very lucrative.
So while the rest of the world is busy, battling it out in court, trying to figure out the rules of the game, Japan's just quietly becoming a tech powerhouse over there in the corner.
And they're like, hey, come invest in our robot.
I love it. It's like the tortoise and the hare, except this time the tortoise is armed with robots. Okay, wow, this whole deep dive has really given me a lot to chew on. If I were calling the shots at, say, Apple or X right now, my head would be spinning trying to figure out how to walk this tightrope.
Tightrope.
This tightrope of participating in the global marketplace, expanding your reach, but also doing it in a way that aligns with your values, that doesn't land you in hot water with every government on the planet. It's a tough balancing act.
It's a high wire act, for sure.
Yeah.
And that's honestly what we try to do with these deep dives. Give you, the listener, the information, the different angles so you can come to your own conclusions. It's not about telling you what to think. It's about giving you the tools to think for yourself.
Yeah. Better than any soapbox, that's for sure. And for our listeners tuning in, just remember, this is just the tip of the iceberg, people. We've barely scratched the surface here. So if something piqued your interest, if something made you go, I want to know more about that, don't just sit there. Go out there and explore. The world is your oyster, or, your search engine at least. Until next time.
Happy researching.